The days after his promise felt different, softer somehow, as though something invisible between us had shifted. He was still cautious, still looking over his shoulder whenever we walked together, still lowering his voice when the world grew too close, but there was a change in the way he touched me, in the way his eyes lingered on mine, as if he was finally allowing himself to believe that I was real, that we were real. For the first time, I felt like we weren't just surviving, we were moving towards something, even if the steps were small and uncertain. One evening he asked me to meet him at a park on the far edge of the city, a place I had never been. The air was cool, the sky painted in shades of gold and deep blue as the sun sank low. He was already there, sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree, his notebook beside him but unopened. When I sat down, he didn't look at me right away. His hands were clasped tightly together, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. For a long while we just sat in silence, watching children chase each other across the grass, watching couples stroll past us without fear, without hiding. My chest ached at the sight, but I stayed quiet, waiting for him to find his words. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes heavy but unguarded. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "Maybe I can't give you everything you want, not yet, but I can try to give you more than I have." My breath caught as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He pressed it into my hand and looked away, his jaw tight as though he was bracing himself for a blow. My fingers shook as I unfolded it, and there it was, his name, written in his familiar handwriting. Simple, delicate, but powerful enough to make my eyes sting with tears. I whispered it under my breath, testing how it felt on my tongue, and for the first time I wasn't met with silence or fear. He looked back at me, and though there was still worry in his eyes, there was also relief. "That's yours," he murmured. "No one else's. Just yours." My heart swelled in my chest, not because of the name itself, but because of what it meant, that he was letting me carry a piece of him he had hidden from the world. I reached for his hand, and this time he didn't hesitate. His fingers locked with mine, firm and certain, as though he was choosing me in that moment, as though he was saying without words that I was worth the risk. We sat like that until the sky turned dark, until the streetlights flickered on and the park emptied. He told me little stories in fragments, not his whole past, but pieces of it, enough to let me see where his fear came from, enough to understand that his rules had once been the only way he knew to survive. And I listened, holding his hand tighter each time his voice broke, letting him see that I wasn't going anywhere. When he walked me home that night, he didn't drop me off at the corner like he used to. He walked all the way to my door, standing close even though the neighbors might see, even though his heart was probably pounding with the risk of it. Before I stepped inside, he leaned down and kissed me in the open air. It wasn't hurried or hidden, it was gentle, slow, and steady, the kind of kiss that said more than words ever could. For the first time, I didn't feel like a secret. I felt like his. Later, lying in bed, I whispered his name again, over and over, letting it fill the room like a prayer. It was just a small victory, just a tiny step out of the shadows, but it was enough to remind me that love wasn't about perfection or freedom all at once. It was about choosing each other, again and again, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. And I knew that whatever came next, whatever battles we had to face, we had already begun to build something real. We had carved out a place where love could exist, even if only between us, and in that moment, it was enough. It was more than enough. The morning after that first reply felt different. I woke up before my alarm, the phone still on the pillow beside me. For once, I wasn't dragging myself out of bed with the same heaviness I carried every day. The first thing I did was open the app. His message was still there, waiting, like proof that I hadn't dreamed it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I finally typed back. I kept it simple, something safe, *good morning, I didn't expect you to reply. I'm just having coffee. How about you, *. The second it was sent, I panicked again. Would I sound too eager? Too boring? Too much? But then his reply came, faster than I imagined, *. I'm on my way to work. I was hoping you'd answer. What do you usually do in the mornings? *. There was something in the way he said he was hoping I'd answer. Not demanding, not casual, but genuinely glad I had spoken to him. I couldn't stop smiling. For the rest of the day, we kept sending small pieces of ourselves back and forth. He told me about the music he liked, the movies that made him cry, the way he hated Mondays but loved quiet evenings with a book. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone, not even my closest friends. Little confessions spilled out, how lonely I often felt, how scared I was of people finding out the real me, how I longed for a connection that wasn't built on pretense. Each time I shared something fragile, he didn't laugh or ignore it. He met it with kindness. He admitted he knew what it felt like to hide parts of himself. He said sometimes he felt invisible, too. That was the second message that shook me, not just words typed on a screen, but a reflection of my own heart. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere, he wrote late one night. But you're not alone. You can tell me anything. I won't judge you, *. When I read that, I had to put the phone down because my eyes filled with tears. It was the kind of reassurance I had craved for years but never found. My mind went back to all the moments when I had kept my mouth shut, forced myself to smile, forced myself to nod when people made jokes that cut too close. I remembered the feeling of being surrounded by people yet always apart, like standing behind a glass wall no one else could see. And now, here was this person, this stranger who barely knew me, saying the words I had longed for all my life, "You're not alone, you can tell me anything." His message settled in me like a seed planted in dry ground. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I read it over and over, tracing each word like it was written just for me. For the first time in years, I felt safe enough to start opening doors I had always kept locked. Our conversations grew deeper. We went from talking about music and movies to fears and dreams. He told me about the time he almost confessed his feelings to someone but pulled back because he couldn't handle rejection. He said he had learned to protect himself by staying silent. I told him about the nights I spent lying awake, wondering if I would ever find someone who truly saw me. The more we talked, the less I felt the weight of isolation pressing down on me. Every notification from him became a lifeline. I would be at work or sitting at dinner with my family, pretending to be engaged in conversation, all the while waiting for the small vibration in my pocket. When it came, my heart would leap. Sometimes it was something funny, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes just a simple "how's your day going?" but it didn't matter what the words were. What mattered was that someone cared enough to ask. Slowly, I realized he had become the part of my day I looked forward to most. I caught myself smiling at random times, replaying his words in my head. Even when I was nervous or insecure, the thought of his kindness carried me through. I began to wonder if this could be more than just casual conversation. I wondered what he looked like when he laughed, what his voice sounded like when he said my name. It scared me to want so much, but it also thrilled me. And all of it traced back to that second message, the one where he told me I wasn't alone. That message had begun to rewrite the story I had been telling myself for years. For so long, my story was that I had to hide, that I would always be on the outside, that I could never be loved for who I truly was. But his words cracked that story open and gave me a new possibility. Maybe I was worth listening to, maybe I was worth loving. That thought alone was enough to make me believe in something I had almost given up on. There are moments in life that feel ordinary on the surface, but deep inside they strike like lightning and change everything. That night I was restless, turning from one side of the bed to the other, feeling the weight of a bad day pressing down on me. I had overheard a cruel comment at work about people like me, said casually as if my existence was a punchline. I laughed along like it didn't sting, but inside I was bleeding. When I got home, I locked my door, sat on the edge of my bed, and told myself the same lie I had told for years, that I was fine, that I was used to this, that I didn't need anyone. But the truth was I did. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did, that I wasn't weak for wanting love, that I wasn't wrong for being who I was. My phone buzzed then. It was him. I almost didn't open it, afraid I would ruin the fragile joy he had given me over the past days. But my hands moved on their own, desperate for his words. His message was longer than usual. It wasn't small talk or jokes or simple questions. It was raw, straight from his heart. He wrote, I need you to know something. You don't have to change to deserve love. You don't have to hide to be worthy. I don't care what anyone says about people like us, you are enough, just as you are. And if no one else tells you that, let me be the one who does. I froze. My chest tightened, and I could feel hot tears filling my eyes before I even finished reading. I read the message again and again, as if it might disappear if I blinked too long. No one had ever said those words to me before. Not my family, not my friends, not anyone. I had built my life around hiding, believing that if people knew the real me, they would walk away. But here was someone who had seen pieces of me, the fragile, scared parts, and instead of leaving, he was telling me I was enough. That message cracked something open inside me I didn't know was still alive. For so long, I had buried the boy who wanted to be loved openly, the boy who wanted to walk down the street holding another man's hand without shame. I had locked him away so deeply that I thought he was gone. But reading those words, I felt him stir again. He wanted to breathe. He wanted to live. I cried that night in a way I hadn't cried in years. Not the silent tears I wiped away quickly, but deep sobs that shook my chest and left me gasping for air. It was grief for all the years I spent hiding, for all the times I silenced myself, for every moment I told myself I didn't matter. But it was also relief, like someone had finally opened a window in a room I thought I would die in. I wanted to write back immediately, to pour out everything I was feeling, but my hands shook too much. I didn't know how to put into words what his message had done to me. So I typed the only thing I could manage, *thank you. You don't know how much I needed to hear that, *. His reply came quickly, *maybe I do. I know because I needed to hear it too, once. And someone said it to me when I thought I'd never deserve it. I want to pass that on to you, *. That was when I realized this wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was something deeper, something life-changing. His words didn't just comfort me, they rewrote the way I saw myself. They challenged every cruel voice I had carried in my head for years. For the first time, I began to believe that maybe I didn't have to spend my whole life apologizing for who I was. Maybe I could be loved not in spite of my truth but because of it. I lay awake long after the messages ended, staring at the ceiling, my chest still trembling from the storm of emotions. And yet beneath it all was a strange calm, a quiet I hadn't felt in years. The kind of quiet that comes when the noise of shame finally starts to fade. His message stayed with me like a heartbeat. Every time I felt the old fear creeping back, I would replay his words in my mind. You are enough, just as you are. They became a mantra, a light I carried in my chest. It terrified me how much power his words had over me, but it also thrilled me. Because for the first time, I wanted more than just to survive. I wanted to live. The days that followed were different. His words from that third message had planted themselves deep inside me, and no matter how hard I tried to go about life as usual, I couldn't. The thought that I might actually be enough just as I was followed me everywhere. At work, I caught myself staring out of the window, thinking about it. At dinner, when my family asked me questions I barely answered, my mind wasn't in the room at all. It was with him. For years I had learned to split myself into pieces, the version people could see, the version I locked away, the version I only admitted to in the silence of my own head. But now I wanted to be whole, at least with him. I didn't want to keep hiding even in the one place where I finally felt seen. I wanted him to know more, to know me beyond the safe fragments. I remember one evening when the weight of it all pressed so heavy on me that I opened our chat window and typed for nearly 10 minutes straight. I told him my real name. I told him about the small town I lived in, the one that pretended to be friendly while quietly pushing anyone different into the shadows. I told him about the years of pretending, about the nights I had prayed to wake up different, about the ache of sitting at family gatherings while people around me talked about girlfriends, weddings, and children as if there were only one way to live a life. Every word I wrote felt like a confession, like peeling off layers of armor I had carried for too long. My hands shook as I pressed send, and the second I did, fear flooded in. What if he disappeared? What if the real me was too much? The 3 dots blinked on the screen for what felt like forever. Then his reply came, slow, thoughtful. Thank you for trusting me with this. I want you to know that nothing you said makes me see you differently. If anything, it makes me respect you more. You've carried so much alone, and you're still here. That takes strength, *. I put my hand over my mouth and leaned back, trying to hold back the flood of emotion. His words were simple, but they wrapped around me like arms I had never felt before. For once, I didn't regret sharing. For once, telling the truth didn't mean rejection. That night I stared at the ceiling long after midnight, realizing how rare it was to feel safe with someone, even if we were just two people on opposite sides of a screen. But it wasn't just me opening up. Slowly, he began to share more of himself too. He told me about his own fears, about the nights he avoided family gatherings because he couldn't stand pretending anymore, about the way he sometimes looked in the mirror and wondered if he would ever be fully accepted. He admitted that the world had made him feel small, but that he was tired of shrinking himself to fit into other people's comfort zones. Reading his messages felt like looking into a mirror I didn't know I needed. I wasn't the only one fighting battles in silence. I wasn't the only one afraid. And somehow, that knowledge gave me courage. Still, outside of our little world, reality pressed hard against me. I couldn't stop the fear that one day someone would find out about these conversations, or that I would slip up and reveal too much. I lived in constant tension, between the safety of our words and the danger of the world outside. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced, not just with excitement but with dread that someone else might see. One evening, while we were talking, I admitted it. I told him how scared I was that someone would discover us, how sometimes I thought about deleting everything to protect myself. His reply was quiet, but steady, I can't promise it will always be easy. But I can promise you won't face it alone anymore. If you ever feel like running, tell me first. Let me be the place where you can breathe, I stared at that message until the letters blurred. It wasn't just comfort, it was an invitation to stop carrying everything by myself. That thought terrified me, but it also set something free inside me. Maybe I didn't have to keep living in hiding. Maybe there was a world where I could show up as myself, even if it was just with one person for now. As the days turned into nights and nights back into days, our messages grew longer, deeper, sometimes stretching for hours. I stopped counting how many times I smiled at the screen or caught myself laughing out loud in an empty room. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was becoming the part of my life I didn't know how I had lived without. And though I didn't want to say it yet, deep down, I knew I was falling for him. I started to notice how his words were changing the way I carried myself in the world. Before him, my days were heavy, filled with routines that kept me hidden and safe. But now, even when the outside world stayed the same, something inside me was shifting. His encouragement pushed me to imagine a life where I wasn't always on guard, where I didn't have to measure every word or hide every thought. It was a terrifying dream, but it was also the first real dream I had let myself hold on to in years. One night after we had been talking for hours, I told him about a friend I had known since school, someone I trusted more than most. I admitted how badly I wanted to tell that friend the truth, to finally say out loud what I had kept buried. His reply was immediate, do it when you're ready, not when you're pressured. But if your heart is asking for honesty, listen to it. The people who are meant to stay will stay, his words lingered with me for days. I played out the moment in my head over and over. What would my friend say? Would they look at me differently? Would they pull away? The fear was almost enough to stop me, but his voice in my mind kept urging me forward. One afternoon, I finally asked my friend to meet me for coffee. My hands shook so badly I nearly spilled the cup when I sat down. I stumbled through small talk, unable to get the words out. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. And then, almost without planning it, the words slipped from my lips, I like guys. For a moment, silence stretched between us so long I thought the ground would swallow me whole. But then my friend smiled softly and said, "I kind of already knew. I was just waiting for you to tell me." Relief flooded through me so strong I almost cried right there at the table. I messaged him as soon as I got home, telling him what happened, describing every detail of my fear and my friend's gentle response. His reply glowed on my screen, *C. You're stronger than you think. The world doesn't crumble when you tell the truth. It opens, *. For the first time, I believed that maybe he was right. But life has a way of testing new strength, and it didn't take long before fear returned. A few days later, I overheard a conversation among relatives. Someone made a cruel remark about a gay couple they had seen, their words laced with disgust. I felt the old panic crawl back up my spine. What if they ever knew about me? What if the acceptance I found with one friend was only an exception, not the rule? That night, I sat with my phone in my hand, debating whether to pull away, whether to erase the one place where I felt free. I thought if I shut it all down, I could protect myself from disappointment, from rejection that might cut too deep. I typed out a message to him, saying maybe we should stop talking for a while. My finger hovered over the send button. My chest ached with the weight of it. Before I could send it, another message from him appeared. *I don't know why, but I felt like I should tell you this tonight. Please remember what I said before, you are enough. Don't let fear convince you otherwise. *. I dropped the phone into my lap and covered my face with my hands. It was as if he had reached across the distance and pulled me back from the edge without even knowing it. His words echoed the third message that had already reshaped me, reminding me of the truth I was about to throw away in panic. I deleted the draft of the message I had written to him, my hands trembling with relief. For the rest of the night, I read his words again and again, each time feeling the fear loosen its grip a little more. It became clear to me then that what we were building wasn't just about companionship or distraction. It was about healing, about daring to step into the light after living too long in the shadows. And though the fear still lingered, the hope he gave me was stronger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying that hope alone. The changes inside me were small at first, almost invisible to anyone else, but I could feel them building like quiet waves. I stood a little taller, spoke with a little more confidence, and caught myself smiling for no reason when I remembered something he had said. His words had become a kind of compass, guiding me through days that once felt endless. With every message, I felt myself becoming less of a shadow and more of a person who deserved to take up space. One night, after weeks of long conversations, he asked me if I had ever thought about meeting people like us in real life. My first reaction was panic. The idea of stepping out of the safety of anonymity was terrifying. What if someone recognized me? What if the people I met judged me, rejected me, or spread whispers that would reach my family? But his next words settled in my chest, *, you don't have to do it tomorrow. Just imagine how it would feel, being in a room where you don't have to hide. Imagine the relief of being surrounded by people who understand you without explanation. *. I sat with that thought for days. I had always pictured the world outside as hostile, but for the first time, I began to wonder if there might be safe corners waiting for me, places where people like me laughed freely, lived openly, loved without fear. I started searching quietly online, finding groups and communities I never knew existed. Some were local, some were just forums filled with voices like mine. Reading their stories felt like stepping into sunlight after years of darkness. Still, doubt clung to me. I told him about my hesitation, how the idea of being seen was both intoxicating and terrifying. He responded gently, *, take it one step at a time. Even if the whole world doesn't accept you yet, even if your family can't see you fully, remember this, you've already taken steps you never thought you could. Every step counts. And I'm here with you, no matter how fast or slow you go. *. His faith in me became a kind of armor. With that, I decided to try. I reached out to a small LGBTQ group that held monthly meetups in the city. Just sending the email felt like climbing a mountain, but when they replied with warmth and welcome, a spark of courage lit inside me. I told him about it immediately, half excited, half scared out of my mind. He replied with a string of encouraging words that made me laugh and cry at the same time. I'm so proud of you. Even thinking about it shows how strong you're becoming. You don't need to do anything more than just show up as yourself. That's already enough. The day of the meeting, I almost backed out. I sat in my car outside the building, palms sweating, heart racing, every instinct screaming at me to drive away. But then I remembered his message, the one where he told me not to run, to let him be the place where I could breathe. I whispered it to myself like a prayer, and somehow my legs carried me inside. What I found there wasn't perfection. Not everyone was instantly welcoming, and I didn't suddenly feel fearless. But there was laughter, there were conversations that didn't require me to censor myself, and there were people whose eyes carried the same tired history as mine. For the first time, I wasn't the only one. That night, when I told him about my experience, his reaction was simple but powerful. I wish I could have been there to see you walk through that door. You don't know how strong that makes you look. Reading that, I realized just how much his presence had given me, the courage to take a step I thought was impossible, the comfort of knowing someone was in my corner even from miles away, the belief that maybe I wasn't as weak as I had always feared. The bond between us deepened in ways I couldn't fully explain. We started talking about things I had never dared to imagine, what it would be like to meet each other, to share space not through screens but side by side. The thought terrified me, but it also filled me with a hope so strong it almost hurt. I lay awake at night thinking about it, about him, about how someone I had never touched could already feel so close. It was then that I realized I wasn't just grateful for his friendship or his encouragement. I was falling in love, slowly and completely, with the way he saw me, with the way he made me believe in myself, with the way he turned my silence into something alive. And though the fear of what could go wrong still whispered at the edges of my mind, his messages kept me moving forward, one fragile but powerful step at a time. The idea of finally seeing him face to face lived in my mind like a secret flame, flickering brighter each day until I could no longer ignore it. We had built something so strong through words on a screen, but part of me craved more. I wanted to hear his voice without the filter of typed letters, to see the way his face lit up when he laughed, to feel the reality of him beyond messages. When he first suggested a video call, my chest tightened with fear. I told him I wasn't ready, that maybe it would ruin everything, that maybe the person I was on a screen wouldn't measure up in real life. His reply was steady and calm, like it always was. I don't need you to be perfect. I just want you to be you. That's who I've been falling for all this time. The words made my hands tremble, and I had to set the phone down before I could even breathe. Falling for. He had said it so casually, but it hit me with the weight of everything I had been holding back. I realized then that the feelings I had been too afraid to name were already written all over our conversations, in the way I waited for his replies like oxygen, in the way his words could break me apart and put me back together in the same breath. The night we finally decided to call, I sat in my room with my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I stared at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop, criticizing every detail, every flaw. What if he saw me and changed his mind? What if the magic disappeared? But then his name flashed across the screen, and before I could lose my nerve, I answered. For a moment, all I saw was his smile, a little nervous but real, more real than anything I had ever imagined. My breath caught, and I laughed out loud, nervous and shaky. He laughed too, and the sound of it washed over me like music I had been waiting my whole life to hear. We talked for hours, but it felt like minutes. There were awkward pauses, moments where we both stumbled over words, but none of it mattered. Every second was proof that he was real, that this wasn't just some dream I had built in the safety of my loneliness. At one point, he leaned closer to the screen and said softly, "You know, I was scared too. But seeing you now it feels right." My throat tightened as I whispered back, "It does." That night, after the call ended, I lay in bed with my heart racing, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being seen and accepted, flaws and all. Over the weeks that followed, the calls became more frequent. We stayed up late, sharing stories, confessing fears, laughing until our sides hurt. Slowly, I began to imagine what it would be like to sit across from him in person, to share the same air, to reach out and touch his hand. He confessed that he thought about it too, about the day we would no longer be separated by screens. The more we talked, the more the idea felt less like a dream and more like a promise waiting to be kept. One evening, after a long call where we both sat in comfortable silence just staring at each other, he said something that stayed with me. "Do you think you can ever be fully yourself, not just with me, but in the world?" I didn't answer right away. The question scared me, because the truth was I didn't know. But after a pause, I said, "I think I'm learning how. With you, I already am." His smile in that moment told me everything I needed to know. We weren't just two lonely people exchanging messages anymore. We were building something real, something fragile but powerful, something that had already changed who I was and who I was becoming. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was loving, and I was being loved back. Looking back now, it feels almost unreal how 3 simple messages could change the entire direction of my life. The first one showed me that I wasn't invisible, that someone out there saw me and cared enough to reach back. The second one told me I wasn't alone, that my fears and my silence weren't weaknesses but scars carried by others too. And the third one, the one that struck like lightning in the middle of my darkest night, told me that I was enough just as I was. Those messages weren't long, they weren't perfect, but they became anchors, holding me steady in a world that had always felt ready to sweep me away. What grew from them was more than I had ever dared to hope for. My life didn't magically transform overnight. I still faced whispers and cruel jokes, still felt the heavy presence of fear when I was around people who wouldn't understand. There were still days when I questioned whether I had the strength to keep walking this path. But the difference now was that I no longer faced those moments alone. Every time the doubt crept back in, I had his words, his laughter, his steady presence reminding me that I was not broken. And slowly, I began to act on that belief. I found myself speaking up more in places where I used to stay quiet. I joined conversations instead of shrinking into the background. I even started sharing small truths with more people I trusted, learning that honesty could open doors instead of always closing them. Each step felt terrifying, but each step also felt freeing. He celebrated every little victory with me, no matter how small. When I told him about opening up to another friend, his reply was full of pride, *, every truth you tell makes you stronger. You're building a life where you don't have to hide, *, those words carried me through the hardest days. Our connection deepened in ways I could never have imagined when I first typed that trembling, "Hi." We began making plans, not just vague dreams but real conversations about what it would be like to share a home, to live without distance between us. We talked about simple things, cooking dinner together, going for walks, sitting side by side on a quiet evening. They were ordinary dreams, but for me they felt extraordinary because for the first time, they seemed possible. Love stopped being a fantasy and became something I could reach out for with open hands. I began to see myself differently too. Where I once saw shame, I started to see resilience. Where I once saw weakness, I began to see courage. His messages had not only shown me love, they had given me back my own reflection, one that wasn't blurred by fear. And in loving him, I learned how to love myself in a way I had never thought I could. There are still nights when I lie awake, afraid of what the future might bring. The world isn't always kind, and there are still battles ahead. But now, when those fears rise, I remember the messages that began it all. I remember how a simple reply gave me hope, how a promise of understanding gave me strength, and how words of acceptance gave me the courage to stop hiding. Those messages are a part of me now, etched into the way I live, the way I breathe, the way I love. And when I think about the life I am building, the friendships that feel real, the small acts of honesty that make me freer, the love that grows stronger with each day, I know that everything changed because I dared to reach out and someone dared to answer. 3 messages. That's all it took to awaken something I thought was gone forever. 3 messages that became the beginning of love, the beginning of truth, the beginning of a life worth living. And no matter what the future holds, I carry them with me like light in the dark, proof that even the smallest words can save a heart, and even the quietest voices deserve to be heard.